with an ensemble cast, I feel like the thing I like is seeing like camaraderie or like friendship between coworkers because I would never be
Mm.
friends with my coworkers.
Hi guys, welcome to Lovecast the BL podcast. I'm your host Alexa, and I have my fellow hosts Kayla and Pixie with me today.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello, hey everyone. So today, we're actually doing a topic that I believe was suggested by one of the members of our Discord server, but it's definitely something that I feel like we have a lot to talk about. But we are going to be talking about the appeal of office romances in BL. So discussing different office romances in BL from different countries, the tropes that make the genre popular, what are the ethics of an office romance, like coming from a fictional perspective, of course, different things like that. So yeah, I mean, when we were discussing this episode, Heather specifically said that Kayla and I are like the office romance, the two office romance people of Lovecast, I guess.
I don't really think that I am, but I'm going to run with it. Because I've said in the past that I don't really like office dramas. So I was kind of confused when Heather said that. But I do
I
know a
feel
lot
like
about
I
office
feel
dramas.
like it was specifically because of Step by Step.
Step by
Like I
step. Yeah,
feel
I
like
was
that's
gonna
where
Probably.
her
say
perspective was coming
100%
from.
because of that.
Because we were both very vocal
That's
about
fair.
Yeah.
enjoying that show. I mean,
Yep.
looking at the list, obviously we have a list of shows here and it's not necessarily comprehensive, and I have watched a lot of them. And I don't mind an office romance, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I enjoy them for the most part from the ones that I've seen, but I do think there's a lot of interesting things to discuss around them. So I guess just jumping right into it, kind of talking about the appeal of office romances. I feel like there's a bunch of different things that kind of make office romances enjoyable to watch or read from a fictional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the first one that we kind of have listed here is forced proximity. So the leads being confined to a small workspace. They have no choice to interact with each other. It kind of falls into the like forced cohabitation, forced to be roommates kind of trope. Um,
It's also the perfect environment to foster like enemies to lovers
yeah, that's what
setting.
I was
Right.
thinking too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I think with a lot of them, they kind of have that enemies to lovers. Like a lot of the times they're like
Yeah.
a boss and employee, so there's kind of like that separation, and the boss has a bad reputation, or two people on teams that don't usually get along and they're like forced to
Mm-hmm.
work on a project together or something like that. And that kind of puts them in an environment where they have to be together and get closer with each other and kind of
Yep.
foster that um, developing romance between them. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think the other big one is definitely power dynamics, especially when you see the boss employee romances. So I think, at least from a fictional perspective, I think people enjoy kind of seeing that power imbalance and the dynamic between a boss and an employee depicted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, I know, like Pixie, you've talked about it before, being a boss of your own company that, like, realistically, like, it's
Yeah,
hard
that's
for you to
gross.
ever imagine. Like, yeah.
It's super gross. But in effect, like if you look for me, if you look at the because I do like office romances,
Hmm.
so but I look at it for from a fantasy point of view,
Yeah.
and that like an office romance for me with like a boss and an employee it could be compared to fantasy romance with the dragons and like it's, I'm disassociating majorly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely has like that forbidden love kind of trope that a lot of people like, because a lot of the times, especially, I think a lot of them are boss and employee, or there's some kind of power imbalance in the relationship, like
Mm-hmm.
someone's a team leader and the other person's like an intern or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of creates that trope of like, well, we shouldn't be in this type of relationship because we
Mm-hmm.
have very different positions at work and I have this like position of power over you. But like a forbidden romance is a lot of people's bread and butter. So I think it's kind of like that being unable to deny your feelings even though you know you shouldn't indulge in them.
Yeah, I mean it's a
Mm.
popular thing in literature,
Mm-hmm.
romances, especially the whole dynamic of someone of a higher rank than you. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of like princes and commoners and like it. I get it. I see it.
Mhm.
But in like if we're gonna compare it to reality, not great.
Yeah.
Mhm. There's also like a mentor mentee kind of aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
seeing the person who is the boss kind of like guide and take care of the
Mm.
one who's under them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, either I feel like there's also that aspect to it as well, which plays
Yeah.
into the whole power balance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also like kind of going the opposite way, the person who is just like the regular level employee or intern or whatever they might be, kind of like being able to melt the heart of the big bad boss and being like the
Mhm.
one person who can kind of get through their tough exterior. And I think because I think a lot of the times with like not always, but the boss, at least to the employees, is often someone who is like untouchable or like he's super cold and doesn't interact with people and they don't know what's wrong with him, and then like the romantic partner is like the one person who can kind of get through that cold exterior and melt him down kind of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it
Mhm.
too, that all kind of plays into the power dynamics and how they play with them in the shows or novels or whatever. um So there's also like the work fantasy, which I guess is kind of going back to what Pixie was saying, like as a boss, people who might work in an office setting could enjoy watching office romances from a fictional perspective because I guess there's an element to like fantasizing that happening to them, fantasizing about it happening to them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I work in an office, I'm not like a boss, so like I guess I would be more on like the regular employee side of things. And like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think when you're thinking about your real job and the people you work with, you're like, I would never imagine like this kind of thing happening to me. Um, but there are, I guess, like some elements to like thinking about like, oh, having like those clandestine moments at work, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, I think like, if it's with like another regular employee, it's like a very different thing, I think. But it
Yeah.
still kind of
Mhm.
has those elements of secrecy and meeting up at work and that kind of thing. So
I
yeah, I
mean,
guess I can see the
if you're an
fantasy element.
ordinary employee, and you sort of get into a romantic relationship with your boss, and kind of the one that um changes him, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of in the fantasy spectrum of like the power you get from sort of um how do you explain that? Because you have the boss who is in a power position, and if he falls in love with you and he's at
You
your like
Yeah, you kind of
beck and
subvert the
call,
power dynamic. Yeah.
yes,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy of it.
Yeah.
Reality, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
relationship sours, who is out the door? Not the
Yeah.
boss.
That's very
Mm.
true. That's very
Mhm.
true.
Mhm. Mhm. This reminds me of how people will say that they have like a work husband or a work wife.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Um, Not, I guess it's kind of relevant, but this is a personal life story. One time I did find one of my bosses on a dating app. They showed up on one of my dating apps. Um, this was a long time ago. The person no longer works at my job,
Uh-huh.
but they
Hmm.
were also like in a relationship at the time, which like it could have been an open relationship. Like I don't
Oh.
really know what the
Okay,
dynamics
yeah,
were
I
there,
know.
but
Yeah.
I remember
Still sus.
seeing, yeah, I remember seeing him on the app and being like, okay. And then I deleted the app and I was like, we're not doing
Right.
this right now.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so
Tea.
yeah, thinking about it in real life, I was just like, no, not for me. But thinking about
Mm,
it from a fantasy perspective as like a regular office worker, then like, yeah, I can understand the appeal of it.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then office romances often typically have like a lot of fun ensemble casts because
Yep.
you know you're working in an office space, so you get a lot of usually fun side characters or interesting side characters. You get a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
supporting romances and stuff like that. So I think it offers a lot of fun dynamics to play with a supporting or ensemble cast.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it means there's more than just like the two leads that you can kind of get
Mm-hmm.
attached to and stuff like that.
Can I also mention one of the reasons I really like office setting romances is because I like seeing people working their different jobs. Like I am so
Mm,
curious about everyone, so I'm just like,
Mm.
how do they work there? Like I just find it really fun to watch. Like with the our dating sim, like
with the game
watching them
developing.
just work and do the graphics and the game and all that. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love that.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
it's fun to see the different types of jobs and work dynamics. I mean, I think a lot of the ones that are just like in office setting, they're just kind of doing like vague office work, make this
Yeah.
vague
Yeah.
presentation or something like
That's
that.
why I mentioned our dating sim because you
Yeah,
actually
so
see
doing
them
something
working in
different.
that
Yeah.
one.
With an ensemble cast, I feel like the thing I like is seeing, like, camaraderie or, like, friendship between coworkers because I would never be
Mm,
friends with my coworkers.
yeah.
They, like,
Yeah.
go out to eat after work, and I'm like, "Why do you wanna
Yeah.
spend more time with them?" Because
Yeah.
they like each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I was gonna say I wonder if it's like a cultural thing, but I know a lot of people here in America who are like friends with their coworkers or have made like really good friends from work settings, and it's like
Yeah.
maybe it's just the job I work. But yeah, I can't imagine like cultivating like super close relationships with people at my job. And it's just like I feel like I view them as like two job people and like outside of job people as like two very different
Mhm.
aspects of my life. So, yeah, it is always interesting to see how much time they spend together. And I mean, I guess part of it's also for the show because like
Mm.
they need to be spending a lot of
Yeah.
time together.
I
But
will say, like, it depends on the job, honestly. Like, if you
mm-hmm.
work for a smaller company and people are more like in a group setting that where they work with
Yeah,
that group often, like, I
it's very
know the
true.
people that work under
Mhm.
BM really have, like, they know each other really well. They do, like, once a month or something, they go out to eat together or something like that,
That's nice.
and they talk like they have a like because everyone works at individual stores, so they don't actually meet each other often, so they have like a Facebook chat, messenger chat, where they all like ask each other questions and talk and
That's
stuff like that.
cute.
So it all depends on the place where you work and what's
Yeah,
normal. And I think
I think
like
that's very true.
at my job, my employees have been with us on average over 10 years. So when you have like a workplace where people stay for a really long time, you get closer relationships, other
Yeah,
than like a convenience store where they're switching employees like
it's
every
a
three
lot of high
months, right?
turnover. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
that's definitely very true. Yeah, I think like just considering the differences between like a small office or a small business versus like a big corporation where
Mm-hmm.
things are very hierarchical, I think that can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also think about like shows that go in the opposite direction where like they show coworkers that are just horrible people. Like obviously Step by
Yeah.
Step is one that comes to mind for
Yeah.
that one. Because Pat's coworkers, a lot of them, not all of them, were just really mean people and starting rumors and really clicky.
Yeah.
So I guess for some places that could be a more realistic depiction of like your different coworkers. Um,
Definitely.
I remember recently, like, in Sunset X Vibes, the coworkers weren't as bad, but a lot of the times I was just like, these people are being mean for no reason, and I'm like,
Mm.
why are you? In that show, like like Bank and the characters were like interns. I was like, why are you just being mean to these interns for no reason? Like, so it's
Mm.
interesting to see when shows go the opposite direction and people are like, I could do without everyone else in the show except for the leads because everyone else is kind of insufferable.
Mm.
Mhm. Showing people in the office setting or, like, work setting not liking each other and being mean is closer to my experience. So I appreciate when the office dramas go that route and showing that it's not all, like,
Mm.
rainbows and butterflies, I guess. It's, I guess,
Yeah,
slightly more realistic even though it's still a fantasy.
yeah, yeah.
That's fair.
It's like two extremes.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean everyone has different experiences. That's why like I feel like it's a setting where you can do a lot with it. There's a
Hmm.
lot of
Mhm.
different dynamics. There's a lot of different settings at work, yeah, with small groups, big groups, mean girls,
Yeah.
not so mean girls. Like you can do so much with it. So yeah.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
definitely. And I feel like that kind of segues or is basically like the other point that we had in terms of the appeal of an office romance is that there is so much different story potential with
Mm.
it, because there's so many different like character dynamics involved and so many different people involved.
Yep.
There's a lot of different relationships you can explore, a lot of different opportunities for drama or
Mm-hmm.
conflict or just plot in general. So I feel like you were saying there's a lot of different directions you can go with an
Yeah,
office
and also
romance and the
different
story.
age groups.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
especially what entices me with office romance is because it's usually you'll have older, or more mature cast. Like it's not a school thing. Like I don't mind school dramas and stuff. I'm just a little bit bored by it. So
Mm-hmm.
you get like the older group of people, and I think that's something um, we need a little bit more of, honestly. And you can do fluff, or you can do super mature.
Mm-hmm.
It, it's endless
Mhm.
possibilities.
Mhm. I love when they have like the wise older office worker character in a show
Mm-hmm.
that's like mentoring
Mm.
like the intern for example, like it reminds me of Step by Step so much. I feel like that's going to keep coming up throughout this.
Probably. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely there's a lot of different age ranges that are shown, and I think it gives a lot of different opportunity also for actors who, at least in like BLs, which do typically fall on the younger end, even if they're not involved with the BL romance always, like you get to see different actors that you might enjoy who are older or younger or whatever. So yeah, I definitely think it provides for a lot of different character roles and age dynamics and stuff. I do always like the older mentor or like the one person who is always like, I don't want to say messing things up, but like not quite getting what's going on, but like in a comedic manner type thing. So yeah, I love the different
I love like a
perspectives you can get.
sassy coworker who just doesn't give a damn and just say
Yes.
whatever they want.
Yes. There's a lot of opportunities for comedy as
Yeah.
well,
Mm-hmm.
which I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's appealing about the Office romance, so I definitely understand why they're so popular and have been such a staple of BL
Mm.
romance dramas in general. I think
Yep.
romance shows in general.
Yeah.
There's so many shows from every perspective all over the world that are based in offices,
Yes.
that have romantic aspects, but there's also definitely a lot of ethical
Mm.
aspects to consider with an office romance. Um, Obviously the biggest one is like a power imbalance between that's often there between the leads, with one often being a boss and the other being an employee. There can be elements of like abuse of power that can be worked in real life. Like a boss and employee relationship is often considered something that's not appropriate. There's usually a lot of like HR regulations that can go into having office relationships in real life, and sometimes they highlight them in the shows as well. But I really think that's like when you're thinking of, are office romances ethical? And I guess in this case we're thinking about ethical within the fictional world that they live in, basically,
Mm,
because obviously in real life, we have our own thoughts on that. But I think that's kind of like the biggest one that comes up, is like the potential abuse of power that can happen between a boss and an employee if there's
mm.
also a romantic relationship involved.
Yeah, I do think like most for the most time, most time with the office romances that are coming out now, they are pretty good at taking into account the power imbalance and usually address it somehow.
I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah, and ones I've seen at least. And it's not to bring up Bed Friend for the thousandth, billionth, millionth time,
Please do.
but that is something that I loved about that show,
Mm-hmm.
is that in that office setting, it showed the power imbalance going wrong and
Mm-hmm.
HR getting involved, and that was, like, I feel the most blatant example of that I've seen in a BL, at least
Mm-hmm.
because it usually is just, like, a fantasy. I don't know how else to put it, but just, like,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it kind of go wrong in that way, I thought was
Hmm.
really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I also
Yeah.
just love, for some reason, I don't know if it's like the forbidden love type thing again, but I love when the romance is exposed and
Yeah.
everyone's like scandalized. And then they're like, oh, this person is like getting privileges because they're like with the boss or
Hmm.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
that happened in A Boss and a Babe. I think it happened in Step by Step too.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. Hmm.
It happens in a lot
Yeah.
of them. So there's like a spectrum of like, I guess, how much they actually address HR or like the power imbalance in the shows. Like it's not always as serious, I guess.
Mm.
Hmm.
I don't know how else to put it.
I mean,
Yeah.
the dressing of like the employees thinking that the person is getting special treatment is so valid because dude, that happens all the time. I have like a really good friend that works for me, and like we have to be careful because like suddenly if she gets like, I ask her to do something because I know she's capable of doing it, then everyone around is just like, you're making her do, she's getting to do that because she's your friend. And they just like don't think about her qualifications at all.
Mm.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, we've definitely seen that in the shows. That I think it's like a realistic concern from the employee perspective, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also like, they also might not be considering all sides of the person who is being offered. And I think that's, it pops up a lot in the shows as well with
Mm-hmm.
like, I remember seeing it in Step by Step, if Pat got an opportunity to do something, then like
Mm-hmm.
it came back was, is it because Jang likes him or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, what was I gonna circle back to? Oh, what Kayla was saying about how Bedfriend had like a more realistic depiction of when dating in the office goes wrong and HR gets involved and the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the fantasy we see a lot of the times, especially if it's involving like a boss or a higher up in the position, is like he just kind of use like his position as a boss just kind of smooths things over.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
like the relationship might get exposed and people might talk about it, but like at the end of the day, because he's the CEO or he's the boss, like his word kind of goes.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's not really anything people can do to question it. So I feel like that's kind of like their way of kind of getting over that, or like not subversing, smoothing over like the potential like HR issues that pop up like when the relationship gets exposed. It's like, well, he's the boss, so you
Yeah,
know.
at the same time, if your employees are not happy about you as a boss, that it can make your life painful, dude. I,
Mm-hmm.
if someone is questioning your ability to lead or questioning what your decisions are and stuff, it can be a freaking nightmare, even if you're at the higher range and they actually don't have anything to say about it. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah. I I I've seen a lot of that dynamic because I'm in a family business. And when
Mm.
me and my sister were growing up working for my dad, we had to be extra perfect because everything we did, everyone was watching and deciding if, okay, if the daughters get to do that, we also get to do that. So we had to
Mm.
like be perfect at any time, or everything went back to our dad, and like he didn't want to deal with it, so he just like moved us around or whatever, even though we weren't doing anything wrong. And
Yeah.
oh, it's for being the person who is getting like being not the person in power in that dynamic is horrible. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
traumatic because you're
Mm-hmm.
doing your best, you're working hard, you you're not doing anything wrong and you're still getting punished for it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, sucks.
Mhm, mhm.
That kind of made me think of, again, not to keep bringing up step by step. I feel like that's the Office BL that I have like the strongest memories of like what actually happened in the plot. But it is kind of like in line with what you were saying, Pixie,
Mm,
because Jang in the show, like he's the manager of his department, but like obviously his dad owns the company,
mm,
and is the CEO, so like he's not necessarily, at the top of the totem pole or whatever.
yeah.
But I was thinking of like when the show progressed and like Jang and Pat actually decided they were going to be like in a relationship. Jang had actually even before they started dating, made the decision to leave his
Mm,
position as their manager because of
mm,
his feelings for Pat and because of
yeah.
how it was impacting the work and stuff like
Mm,
that. And then, of course, like when the relationship came out, that kind of, made that whole thing much more imminent. And even in the end, I think Pat ends up at a different position as well,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
because, things got so out of hand from that, even though he
Mm,
was already planning on leaving and stuff like that. But yeah, I think um, kind of going back to what you're saying, how like it can be hell, like
yeah.
if your employees don't like what you're doing, or
Mm,
don't like the fact that your relationship has been exposed. But
mm.
yeah, I just kind of
Yeah,
thought
they
of that.
can make your life a living hell. And it's the same outcome that happened in Old Fashioned Cupcake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he also went for another position. And I think, like, from a realistic standpoint, and a non toxic standpoint, I think that's the best solution
Mm-hmm.
for a story, that they actually just, like, you don't have to lose your job, but just another position where they're not, like, in direct um, contact at work. Like one is the boss of the other directly, because
Mm-hmm.
it's that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Mhm. So, do you think that there is a line that could be crossed with office BLs, or are they all just like kind of there's fiction, so it's for entertainment purposes and it's not that serious? Like, is there something that they could depict or think something that they could do in them that would be just you wouldn't consider it okay for them to be depicting or
um
romanticizing?
well, the one thing that pops into my head talking about this, and I don't know if you can classify it as an office romance, but it's at least between a boss and someone that works for them, is call it what you want. Is that
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think because It's first of all, the age range of the two love match is not okay. But also it's based off real people, and that's where
Mm.
it's like, that's no, no, we don't do that, especially in something that is so, can be so toxic in real life. It's like I was saying, like, this office romance is a fantasy and it should be kept in the fantasy aspect of it. When you like pull it into reality and real people, and that, you're crossing a line.
Yeah.
There's always like the ethical argument when like something is like based on a true story
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's something super serious and it's
Mm-hmm.
being dramatized for a series. So I think that's kind of what the situation is with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know like if there is a line, like when I'm trying to think if there's a line these dramas shouldn't cross. Um I don't know if like there's something specifically that, I mean, like I have my own personal lines that I'm like, okay, I would not necessarily be comfortable watching like that particular dynamic portrayed in like a boss employee relationship or whatever. I think like if you're getting into spaces, for me personally, of like the boss using their power to coerce the employee to do certain
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of area. I think that's kind of when you need to start treading very carefully in depicting that and how you're showing that in the show. Not necessarily to say like it can't exist, but then we kind of get into that discussion of, are we romanticizing this type of dynamic? So I think when you're kind of treading into that area of like coercing your employee, whether it's like to do sexual
Essay.
stuff or whatever, you have to be very careful. Not to say necessarily that it shouldn't be depicted, but I think kind of like the discussion that we've had many times before, just like depicting it in a way that is not necessarily romanticizing what's going on, or
Yeah.
showing it in a way that there's like consequences or some kind of, I don't know what words I'm looking for. Something that shows like this is not something that you should necessarily be
Hmm.
enjoying, question
Yeah.
mark. I don't know if I'm like, I don't know. It's
I
so hard when stuff is fictional to say like you shouldn't enjoy this, but I think there are certain
Yeah.
like ethics to the ways things should be portrayed, when we're getting into those kind of blurring lines between like,
Yeah.
is this
Honest
consensual and that kind of thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
Honestly, I really, really dislike it when we're getting into territory where there's an issue already in the work life. Like people being essayed at work, or harassed or stuff like that. Um, if we show that without showing any consequences for it, or having
Mm-hmm.
a talk about it somehow, like not
Mm-hmm.
like it ending up in a relationship without any form of consequences for the initial actions, or uh, what's it called, with
Repercussions.
yeah, yeah, that the character who's doing the wrong thing isn't hasn't evolved from that, like hasn't
Mm-hmm.
learned anything from it, um, then we're in a territory I'm not comfortable with, and I
Yeah.
probably would stop watching just
Hmm.
because of that. Yeah.
I was trying to think of a specific example, but like we said, the office dramas that we've all seen lately, they're
Are
pretty
pretty good.
solid with their
Yeah.
depictions and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it did kind of remind me of that history season
Yeah, I
that
was
was
gonna say
awful.
that. I was gonna say that.
And literally does all of that. Literally does
Yeah,
everything Pixie
literally,
said.
100%.
I
I
think
was thinking the exact
oh,
same thing.
that's the
Yeah.
only example I can think of. That
Yes.
one was just
History
I
4.
don't even
Yep.
know what to say about that.
We have a whole episode dedicated to what we
Yeah.
have to say about that.
Yes, we do. So
Mhm.
go watch that. It's been a while though. Like it's been, when did we talk about it? Like 2 years ago?
In
Yeah,
2022 or
dude.
2021, I don't
We've been
remember.
doing this for too long.
Yeah, no, that is one example that definitely comes to mind. But yeah, otherwise, like, at least of the shows we have listed here, and obviously, like, it's not a comprehensive list because there's
Mm,
so many shows out there probably that we don't even know about. But,
yeah.
and the ones that I can think of that I've watched in recent years, at least, like, I don't really, um, can't think of any examples where, like, they just bulldozed ahead without showing any type of like consequences or real like that kind of thing, or have been just like really blurring those lines with the relationship. So I think a lot of them these days at least do a good job of kind of addressing the aspects of a employee boss relationship that could be concerning, even if it's not, even in like the comedic ones. I feel like they still find ways to address it in a way that like works for the show. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed.
Yeah, so we have lots of examples of office romances from different countries. So I think like maybe we can just kind of go through some of them, talk
Mm-hmm.
about ones we enjoyed. I know we're not all have going to have watched all of these, but
Mm-hmm.
um like from Thailand, very recently we had The Trainee.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's Step by Step. Sunset X Vibes was also this year. A Boss and a Babe, Bed Friends slash and Middleman's Love, since they're kind of a pair.
Mm-hmm.
I know recently there has been that Bad Guy My Boss airing. Have either of you been watching that
Yeah.
one?
I haven't, but I always see the guys' TikToks and it makes
Yeah.
me want to watch it.
I don't actually like I haven't I don't even know if I watched the trailer, but it gives me kind of those vibes. And someone please like in if you're in the comments watching, I think it's a boss and a secretary, and it's like they have some kind of like sex relationship agreement going on. I've been trying to like follow the commentary in our Discord about it, but I'm honestly not quite sure. So I don't want to speak and like say this show is about this when it's entirely not, but that's another one I
Mm-hmm.
know that's airing right now. Um
Mhm.
Obviously I love Step by Step. Um
Yeah. I did end up liking Step by Step, but I do think that it was very um slow paced.
yeah, I mean
Mhm.
that's fair.
Mm.
The pacing worked for me, but I think like it's one of the ones from if we're looking at it from the office romance perspective, it did
Mm-hmm.
a good job of like covering all of the bases that we're thinking about.
Yeah,
Like it had those different
definitely.
relationship dynamics. It had the shitty employees, but it also had like, Pat had some good mentors, and like Bruce's character and the other girl who
Love
was like
Bruce's
his,
character.
I don't know if she was his manager. She was a superior on his team, but I can't remember his name.
Mm.
Her name, I'm sorry. And then like, it had like Jang as the boss and addressing I mean, I think the reason that show was so slow paced was because Jang struggled so much having feelings for his employee as someone that was his manager. Like my guy
Yeah.
was in crisis about that literally to the point of
The whole
tears.
time.
Like literally the whole time he was like having a crisis about having feelings for his employee.
Yeah.
And like he did end up like, choosing to leave because of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it covers a lot of those different elements and addresses a lot of those different elements. So I know even though
Mm-hmm.
the romance didn't work for everyone, I think I like as an office romance, it's a pretty comprehensive example of like what can be included in them.
Yeah. I agree.
Mhm. Yeah. I have nothing to add to that. No notes.
Yeah, and I haven't really watched any of the other ones. Like I watched Bad Friend, and I have the same thoughts as Kayla on that one. Although I'm not as hyped, but it was a good show. Yeah, I think there's more potential in Thailand with office romances. Like they could like push it more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really have anything to say about a Boston Babe, but I think they did really well encompassing everything that we talked about as well. I just wasn't a fan of I think the writing of the plot, but like it was there. Like they had it all. The
Mm-hmm.
execution, maybe not quite, but I think it's a solid example nonetheless.
Shouldn't Freen and Becky's be on the
I
list,
was
or
gonna
are
say
we?
Gap. Gap
Yeah.
Gap.
is another
Oh,
example of.
I was gonna ask, or are we just
Gap was
doing
crazy.
BLs? Are we doing QLs too? Oh.
Oh man, Gap was. I honestly like. I feel like at this point can't even remember a lot of the details of Gap in terms of like the office romance aspect of it. Like I remember them like fucking at the office, like like hooking up in Sam's office and stuff like that. I very specifically remember those two side characters where like one of them was having an affair and like they were dating each other and like the other like people on their team were just like, okay, like, it got exposed that they were dating each other. And one of them was cheating on their partner to be in that relationship, and it was just like
Yeah.
not questioned at all, basically. Um, I mean, I guess one aspect of that show was that like originally Sam had a very firm no dating rule, and like she would
Mm-hmm.
like fire people for dating within the office,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But yeah, I couldn't really remember
That's like the same as the Taiwanese one. That the one with the weird name,
the
with the
one
no
with the
dating
weird
rule.
name.
The one with the weird name.
The be loved
Mm.
in the
Oh, Be
house.
Loved in House.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. 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 It's like with the weird
Yeah,
name.
The
it's
That
weird
could be like
name.
a
multiple.
weird name.
Um, and same thing with Gap. Loved how Sam played into that like very stern boss that only one person could get through to
Mm-hmm.
her. And even
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
that was a challenge. That was like a big appeal for me watching Gap, which
Mhm.
Yeah.
it honestly goes back to, well, it goes back to like the tsundere
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
type thing.
Trope.
She was very
Yeah.
much that type of character, but it also
Uh-huh.
goes back to the forbidden romance thing, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
And enemies to lovers.
Enemies to
Yeah.
lovers. It has it all,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Mm.
Gap
I
supremacy.
listen, I love Gap. Even all
I
these years
loved Gap.
later, I will be a champion for Gap. Sunset X Vibes, I did not end up finishing. I think I got maybe through 5 episodes. I'm so sorry,
I
Moss and
haven't
Bank.
watched anything there.
But I think theirs was interesting because their whole dynamic was that they like matched on a dating app first and had been
Mm.
like talking on a dating app. Um, were basically like in the talking phase of relationship, met up for the first time, and then like Banks' character started his internship and realized then that like the person he'd been talking to on this dating app was now the president of his company. Um so I think it was an interesting way the relationship started. I feel like I didn't get far enough into it to see if there was really any consequences or any like company backlash from their relationship. I know like when the other employees on their team found out, it wasn't like a huge deal for them. Like the other people
Mm.
part of their internship and in their specific department, it wasn't like a huge deal for them. But I don't remember if like I didn't get far enough to know like if at that larger company perspective it ended up being more of like a conflict point later on. But I think like in general it had some pretty interesting office dynamics. The characters were interns and like it was one of those ones where like everyone ends up having a partner. Some of them, oh, I guess they were all office romances in some form or another, but I didn't watch far enough to see all of them kind of
Mm.
actually
Mhm.
come to fruition. So
Mm.
I don't know if I can give too much more insight on that one, but
Mm.
yeah.
No, I
I think
didn't watch
Thailand,
it.
their office romances, like I think they go the pretty like stereotypical like office route.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're just kind of, I mean, they have like specific jobs, but we're just kind of in like an office, like, and we're doing different office things.
Mm-hmm.
I did think of, I don't know if it really counts as like an office romance, but the wedding plan from, or the wedding
Mm.
planner from Me Mine Why, where like one is a
Oh.
wedding planner and then he's planning um his partner's like wedding. So it kind of has like almost employee boss dynamic since he's working for this person as his wedding planner.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not necessarily happening in an office. But I thought that one had a pretty interesting dynamic, but I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it besides that. And I don't necessarily know if it would count as an office romance per se. I guess it's more of
Mm-hmm.
like a work
Mm.
related romance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then we have Japan, which Japan loves a workplace romance, or
They're
stories that are
so
based
good
around
at it.
work in general. Cherry Magic, Osan's Love, Old Fashioned Cupcake, Candy Color Paradox. I think Japan is one of the few, maybe not one of the few, but I think what I find interesting is that I think their stories do have like some power dynamics at play because people are at different positions in the team,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily always that boss and employee dynamic. Like, with Cherry Magic, like they worked in the same department, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like Kurosawa was like a star employee, but he wasn't necessarily like the boss or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in Candy Color Paradox, that was the one where it was like a photographer and a reporter, right?
Yeah.
And they got
Mhm.
They were working
forced to work
together.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Japan kind of gives us more perspective of like relationships where
Mm-hmm.
the dynamic is more, at least a little bit more equal, and it's not
It's
necessarily
not like a
always that.
power-based
Mm-hmm.
dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, there's definitely dynamics there for different reasons. Like in Cherry
Mm-hmm.
Magic, there was a dynamic there for a different reason, and I think like a lot of the dynamics there come from like maybe one character feeling inferior to the other
Mm-hmm.
or feeling like he's always competing
Mm.
with the other even if he necessarily isn't necessarily. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think they offer a different perspective in that way, an interesting
Agreed.
perspective at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Japanese ones are the ones that like I can say that I love every single one we have on our list. Some more than others, but I think
Of
if
course.
you look at it, because Cherry Magic was how many years ago?
Three, maybe?
Three?
Four?
Yeah,
Three, I think.
yeah. An old fashioned cupcake was last year.
2022, maybe.
Ugh, I feel old.
Time is not real. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Well, whatever. It's they've been consistent over the years, and the
Mm-hmm.
quality and the storytelling, and they're all like based off of manga.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of goes back to that office romances tale as old as time. It goes back. It's a big thing in mangas too, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Japan, because of like the general work culture that Japan has, I think offers a very interesting perspective to their office romances, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
often tied into the stories and the relationships and
Yeah.
how they function. Like obviously that was a big one in Old Fashioned Cupcake.
Mm-hmm.
And that one also kind of, deals with like the age dynamics of someone feeling like
Yes.
they're basically reaching their midlife crisis and kind of stagnant in life and in work.
Mm.
I think there's a lot that deal with like being overworked and trying to find that balance between having a
Yeah. Also
consistent career and also
blurring the
like
lines between like masculinity and femininity. Like even though you're a man doesn't mean you can't enjoy
mm-hmm,
sweets
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and pretty
Mhm,
desserts.
mhm.
do girly things, so
Girly
called.
things.
I'm
Yeah.
putting this in quotes for anyone who might be listening. Girly things is in quotes
Yeah.
because things are not gendered, but
I can say like
in society.
if the
Mhm.
whoever's listening, if you haven't seen Old Fashioned Cupcake, you need to go watch it because it's one of the greatest. One of the not
Mhm.
even just like Office, but just like BLs in general. Like, it's so good, and I'm obsessed. And it's not like I usually tend to go for more mature ones. This is really tame for me.
Really tame.
Tame.
So
Mhm,
no, it's
mhm.
great. Can I say Cherry Magic? I would say that Cherry Magic is the very peak of anti toxicity in the workplace. Especially
Mm.
because here you have like a character who is hearing the inner thoughts of the other person, who is just like, oh, how considerate he is all the time, like how much he is thinking about the person and how comfortable they are, and just putting their personal space and just comfort first instead of
Mm-hmm.
forcing themselves on that person, which, yeah, is toxic environment if you force yourself on your coworkers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but it's the very opposite of what we've seen in yaoi so many years. And considering this is it's like an older manga, like it's been a couple of years. Um, it's like one of the first ones who were like adamantly the story, the plot is about not forcing yourself on someone.
Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah, that's true.
Mm.
He was very like, I mean, he's one of the OG Green Flag
Hmm.
characters, I think, in terms of his respect for Adachi and his comfort, both at work and working together and in the relationship and stuff like that. So I
Yeah,
would agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. The very notion that consent is sexy.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Very true. Very true. Um. Okay, so Korea is also a country that does a lot of just in general workplace dramas and workplace romances.
Hmm.
On the BL front, we have June and June, our dating sim, the new employee, roommate to Pundak 304, the director who buys me dinner. Um, I, I can't really remember details about a lot of these. That's really bad to
Honestly,
say.
me, I haven't seen a lot of these, or I've just seen one episode other than my date or our dating sim. So
Yeah.
I,
I can't really speak to
I
it.
I can't remember June and June. I watched it, but I can't remember it. Roommates of Pongduck 304 was really cute. What made that show was the chemistry between the actors and not
mm-hmm,
actually the story itself.
mm-hmm,
And the
mm-hmm,
story
mm-hmm,
itself revolves a lot more of them cohabitating than the actual office, from
Hmm.
what I can remember. Well, at
Yeah, I
least I
don't
yeah.
feel
really
like
remember.
that's where stuff happened. Like, not a lot of stuff happened at work. Um, but it's great. The chemistry between them, top tier. Our
Yeah.
dating sim is great. Like, the I have notes like would what would make it better, but I think it's unique. It is very it's set up in a way that makes sense. Like, it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that they have that kind of relationship when things get revealed and stuff like that. It's you can like the whole trauma he gets from the other guy running away is a little bit questionable, but
Mm.
but all in all, I think it's a good story, and especially like their aesthetic and the office and how they're actually working at work is awesome.
Imagine that.
Hmm.
Now they're
Hmm.
actually working at work.
Yeah, I feel like it's the case with a lot of the KBLs in general, where I think the chemistry is the really good part, and
Mm-hmm.
everything else a lot of the time just kind of falls to the wayside. And it just makes me like wish that like I would love to see a bigger budget KBL in
Mm,
an office setting
yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
so many iconic K dramas that are in the
Mm-hmm.
office
Mm-hmm.
setting. And
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
it would be really cool to see more resources and money and time put
Put into it.
into
Yeah.
a Korean BL office romance
Yeah,
because
there's so
they
much
honestly
potential.
all like overlap with each other. Like
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And it always comes back to like um the runtime and the budget and the number of episodes. I feel like just doesn't really lend to creating a show that I think really, like you said, I think like the chemistry can really stand out, and a lot of the times like some of the characters can really stand out. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like building a plot around an office romance, I feel like it doesn't really give them the time to build on or expand on that as much as some of these dramas in the other countries have, with like longer episodes and longer
Mm-hmm.
run times and episode counts and things like that.
Yeah.
So like yeah, a lot of them I'm like, okay, I remember enjoying, the relationship or the couple or the
Mm-hmm.
chemistry, but I can't really remember a lot
The
of what
plot.
happened in the
Yeah.
drama.
mhm.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it was just like, I enjoyed the vibes of what the relationship was giving. I think our dating sim stands out because,
Mm-hmm.
at least of this list, it's the one where like the job is the most different because they're like game developers and like
Mm-hmm.
it's still an office job, but it's a little bit different than just being like nondescript office worker at nondescript office kind of setting, which I think is what
Yeah.
a lot of these other ones fall into.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more from the office romance perspective, maybe. But yeah, I don't know.
Agreed.
And then from Taiwan, we have You Are Mine, Plus and Minus, We Best Love, Fighting Mr. Second, and then Beloved and House I Do are the four that we have listed there. Um, I mean, I think
You are
obviously we're all
mine.
fans of.
Which one is that?
I don't think I watched You Are Mine,
I
but I'm
feel
not
like
entirely
I feel
sure.
like I what like the name is so like stuck. Like I
Came out
feel like I'm
last
having
year.
deja vu, but
Mm.
what's it about?
There's a whole long synopsis here, and I don't know if I want to read the whole thing.
Like the first two sentences.
Okay. Yao Shun Yu is cheerful, energetic, optimistic young man. He is thrilled to be hired as a secretary at the successful online marketing company Tianxia, despite his lack of experience, as he wants to learn money in order to help his parents, who work hard running a small breakfast restaurant.
Mm.
Okay.
He finds out he won't be working for the person who interviewed him, but rather the general manager, who is very hard to work for.
Yeah.
General
I
manager
mean,
is cranky, demanding, unreasonable
yeah, yeah,
expectations.
yeah. It's one of those
Mm.
that like it's super generic plotline, but it's done okay. So I remember I watched it all the way through, but it's since it's such a generic thing, it's kind of like I can't really remember it, but I remember that I watched it and I liked it.
I didn't watch that one. So I'm not
my
sure.
my favorite one of that list is We Best Love.
Of course.
I
Definitely.
did I did not like how they handled the miscommunication part. Like I felt like that was very confusing when you come into the second season. Mm,
Oh,
but
why
I
they just
do.
like were not in contact anymore?
Yeah, no, like it's basically like okay, he flies to see him, sees him sitting on a blanket with some woman and a kid, and then just runs. I don't, it makes zero sense to me. You flew to America, saw him on a blanket with a kid and a girl, and just suddenly thought that, oh yeah, that has to be his kid. Let's not talk to him. Just let's fly back to like it makes no sense. Okay, so I have an issue
That's
with that.
the
That's bad writing,
yeah.
honestly, like bad
Fair,
writing.
fair.
But
Mhm.
if you look away from that, from what they sort of created to make sense of why they're enemies again. I enjoyed the plot and the drama, and they have like great chemistry. Like they're great actors, and it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think it's one of the highlights of in general. I think Taiwanese BL, at least for me, it's definitely up there. It's one of my favorites.
Hmm.
I remember liking plus and minus, but for me, like they were employees, like I think were they both lawyers who worked
Yeah.
at the same
Yep.
company, but I feel like
Mm.
that show was more about them being best friends to
Hmm.
lovers, which
Yep.
I think is why I like that one. Like technically it's an
Oh, you
office
love
romance and
that
there
plotline.
was
Yeah.
I love friends to lovers. We've talked
Yep.
about this. But I think that show was like there was definitely aspects of their work that was relevant to the plot and plot points based around like their office work and their jobs as lawyers and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But um, I feel like the draw of that show was more of like the friends to lovers dynamic that they had going on, at least for me. So,
Yeah.
but I did enjoy it. So if it's an office romance that I enjoy, technically speaking.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then Beloved in
Mm.
House I Do.
Dude, I that show is like the most boring shit I've ever
Oh
sat through.
Oh
no.
I am
no.
sorry. And I love the actors. They are super cute, but it is so freaking boring. I'm sorry.
I don't think I ever finished it. But I
Exactly.
don't I don't remember too much of it. I'm not sure.
Oh, it was so boring. I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone. I know people liked it. I've seen people talk about liking it, but I just no. It's not for me, honestly.
No, I get it because my thing with a lot of office BLs is that it just feels like the same thing recycled over and over again. And you have to bring something new to the table per se to stand out from the rest of them because there are so many being made.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I feel like for me, very rarely I find them entertaining enough to keep watching because
Hmm.
Hmm.
there's something that feels so generic about it. And
Hmm.
I mean, there's also just personally, like, I don't relate to any
Hmm.
of that.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't know.
No,
I
I
So
think
mean
I
it can
get
be
it.
also.
if they make it so generic that you're just sitting there and you're not experiencing the culture because they have no cultural plot at all, and you're not experiencing the work because they're not showing them working, and like it's not rememberable, it's not interesting, it's just it's not, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't comment on that one specifically. I think in general it can be hard to find the balance with an office romance of like, okay, this one is focusing too much on work stuff and we're not really getting enough character development or
Mm-hmm.
romance development,
Mm,
or this one like the work aspect isn't rememberable, so I don't really know like how it works as an office romance, or I think it's very hard to find one that kind of like strikes the right balance, and obviously people have different preferences. Like I think some people might enjoy watching a lot of like the office shenanigans and not really mind as much that the romance isn't as prevalent, especially if like the ensemble cast is strong, or things like that. But I think it can be hard to kind of strike that balance of like what is the ideal place for an office romance to exist in that balances the office aspect and the romance aspect,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean can be said true of any
yeah.
kind of show genre, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. In general, I think, all of these different examples, for the most part, do kind of offer elements that show different ideas about work in their countries and the working style and the working culture in their countries. Yeah, so I think, we obviously know that Korea and Japan have very demanding work cultures, and I think in general their shows depict that. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about how Japan very much does. And a lot of their shows. I think Korea, I don't know if it's really something that's as heavily focused on in the BLs. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think maybe you can say from like a lot of the characters are always working late hours, and like there's very specific like expectations of the type of work they'll do and how like them putting everything aside for work. I mean, I think there's a lot of examples of characters like dropping everything to go do stuff for work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think maybe that's because what we were saying before, like they don't have as much time to really expand on the office aspect. We don't see that highlighted as much as in other Korean dramas that are
Yeah.
based in the
I,
office.
I think one interesting thing about like Japanese and Korean that both have too is the after work culture. Like they do go out to
Mhm.
eat with
The company
work a
dinners and
lot.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's basically a part of your job to go out
Mm-hmm.
and drink
Mm-hmm.
with your
Yeah.
With your
fellow.
bosses and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that type
definitely.
of thing's always interesting to me, just like
Mm-hmm.
the work etiquette of it, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And
Mm-hmm.
it really does show that, like, in Japan, for example, like the work day is all day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's not technically work, it's still work.
Yeah, and you
And
don't
so
get
I guess,
paid overtime.
yeah, so it makes sense that like Japan is the birthplace of office BLs essentially
Yeah.
because it seems like everyone's always at work.
Yeah.
So it's like where else are you going to find romance almost?
True.
Yeah, actually though.
Actually, that is valid.
I feel like I don't have as much knowledge about what work culture in general is like in Thailand or Taiwan to kind
Mm,
of comment on if their shows are
realistic or not?
portraying the work culture in the shows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I do think we see that kind of similar. It's not necessarily to the level of like Korea or Japan where like you're expected to go out and drink with your bosses after work, but like I think we were kind of saying earlier, I think we see a lot, at least in the Thai BLs, of like people spending time together outside of work and going out to eat together and doing that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if, you know, that is something that's common to the culture there. So like if anyone is familiar with Thai work culture, I'd be really interested to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Taiwan, like if the shows depict that accurately at all, but I feel like I don't really have a lot of knowledge about the work culture to comment on it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
same.
I love in the Thai BLs, the office ones, they always have them go and do karaoke
Yeah.
after. It's always specifically going to a karaoke bar. So I need someone to tell us if that is just like a super common cultural
Didn't we
work
see
thing
a
there.
lot of karaoke places when we went there?
More than I see usually, so
Yeah, I
I
guess
would
so.
consider yes.
Yeah, interesting. That's a good point. Well, I guess just to kind of wrap it up as like a final question, do we think office romance BLs will ever go out of style?
No, honestly, I think it's such an integral part to everyday life that as long as people are working in offices, that's gonna be
Hmm.
like a thing they fantasize to get out of their ordinary, boring lives. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think office romance in general, I think is something that's always going to be a staple of romance dramas. I think we'll definitely see like ebbs and flows. Like I think, you know, we saw a lot of office romances from Thailand at a certain point last year. And you know, it kind of ebbs and flows, you know, as the trends ebbs and flow and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I think in general, office romances will always be a thing that exists and we'll always be seeing them.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, in the same way that there's always going to be high school themed BLs, I
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
think office BLs aren't going anywhere. And also, as long as actors that people like are playing in them, they're
People are
Yeah.
never
gonna
going to go
watch
out
them.
of style. Like, it's always the case, I feel, that like people will be like, oh, I'm not really interested in this, but I like the pairing that's in it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to
Yeah.
watch it. So that applies to all of them. But yeah, in the same way,
Hmm.
office BLs definitely not going out of style. I don't think anytime soon.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all for our episode this week. If you're a fan of office romances, let us know in the comments what you like about them, what aspects are most appealing to you, and if you have a favorite office romance, share it down below. If it's one we haven't watched, maybe we'll be inspired to pick it up and check it out. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. And while you're at it, why not share the episode with a friend or two? That kind of stuff really helps us out. You can also check out our Patreon for early access to episodes and reviews, as well as lots of exclusive content. And as always, all of our socials and places where you can find us are linked down below. So that's all we have for you guys this week. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Obviously, Korea and Japan have, very demanding work environments, and
Oh.
I don't know why my fire alarm just
It might be the battery is going. It usually makes
Oh.
that sound if the battery is.
I mean, I just changed it not that long ago, so I don't know.
It might be a fire.